time to grow with the SEO Queen. Receive the perfect leads like never before. No traffic is gonna explode. It's time to grow.
Welcome to the SEO Queen Tech Show, a podcast to help you get more credibility, visibility, and profitability through inspiration, technology, and marketing insight. This podcast is for professionals and entrepreneurs who are looking to get more customers, clients, and patients. We are broadcast worldwide on Bashani Radio, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. Bashani Radio, always talking about everything from New York City. You can listen to the SEO Queen Tech Show on any mobile phone or tablet device. Also, as a thank you gift for listening to the SEO Queen Tech Show, you can go to SEOqueen.com, click on Speak to the SEO Queen, and get a 15-minute complimentary consultation, the Reach More Clients Power Session, to help you strategize on how to get more customers, clients, and revenue without paying for advertising through the power of search engine optimization. So I am so excited to have with me a phenomenal business developer, consultant, trainer, and instructor. Anthony Williams served in the U.S. Navy for 21 years as a communications technician, recruiting supervisor, and master trainer, and a human resource manager. He is currently serving on the Los Angeles Small Business Commission, representing the 5th District. For Supervisor Catherine Barger. He has volunteered his experience while working with veterans organizations to assist in the transitioning and reintegration of returning veterans in the Southern California area. Anthony is also the commander for the Greater Los Angeles chapter of the National Association of Black Veterans, a congressional chartered nonprofit that provides employment and housing referrals and entrepreneurship training. He possesses an MBA with a concentration in human resources and a bachelor's in business law. As a Navy recruiting professional for 12 years of a 21-year career, he was credentialed as a master trainer. He teaches small business training workshops, and he also was a featured presenter at the 2021 Reach More Clients Power Conference, sponsored by the SEO Queen, along with the LA South Chamber and also the Urban League, so the Urban League of Los Angeles. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to some and present to others none other than Anthony Williams. How are you today?
Good morning, Z. I am fine. I hope all is well with you as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I just definitely want to thank you for taking the time for being on the podcast. And I wanted to start out with a question. What makes business so attractive to you? What has sustained you through your long, impactful career in business? What drew you to business? You could have been anything you wanted to be, but why a business expert?
Well, that's an interesting question because sometimes I ask myself, but I guess, to be quite honest, I went to college right after high school for several years, and I quite honestly I didn't do well. So I had some options, and one of those options was to join the military. So I always wanted to travel, join the Navy, and in the Navy I was a communication electrician. Out of the nuclear power program. And after a while, I had to do an assessment, and circumstances dictated that the only way, and I needed to get back to the Philadelphia area, was for me to go on recruiting duty and, Navy recruiting duty. Well, as a lot of your audience probably understands about military recruiting, it can be a not so nice endeavor. But interestingly, when I had no choice, I said, well, I have to get back to Philadelphia. So took the position, and it was like throwing a fish into water. And here's what I mean. I had to use all of my skill sets to compete. And now we're talking about the 80s, and there were high goals or quotas, if you would prefer to use that word. And the competition between the branches of the military to recruit the best and brightest was ruthless, predatory, and cutthroat. And in that environment, I sort of blossomed because I thought I could always outthink my opponents. And I also had genuine selling skills. And so now, if you can develop strategies and develop a selling acumen, well, those are bricks in the foundation of doing good business. I didn't realize it at the time. So after a while, I got to really be interested in the analytical side. And I had really good success, great success, not good success, great success. And I was always curious as to the whys. So the things in which I didn't perform well, or the areas I wanted to study and research and see how I could improve it. Well, how I could foster improvement. Well, Z, those are the same things that you do as an entrepreneur and a business owner. You do analytics, and I got into analytics. And for me, it was a personality-driven success individually. And then when I started going up the ranks and my scope of responsibility increased, I had to figure a way to train people, as all owners do. And I'm sure you're quite aware, Z, to how can I motivate people to perform at their best? How can I coach them? And you hear this in sports a lot, to put the players in the positions in which they can excel as close to their true potential. Same thing applies to business ownership and to our entrepreneurial community. So doing all that, I start delving into the psychology of sales, and so many what I call value added data to make what I did better and put my people in a better position. So I became a master trainer after the Navy. So I got ready to retire. I said, okay, I'm 21 years in. I'm going to retire and take a job in human resource. In the interim, I had finished my degree and gotten a master's in business with a concentration in HR. And I said, well, let me go into the HR field and get a job. Well, that's one of the biggest mistakes I made, because at heart, after having—
Why was that a mistake? Why was getting a job in HR a mistake for you?
Well, because I really should have struck out in that entrepreneurial vein, Z, at that time, because I knew, or I felt I had a great foundation from being a military recruiter. Now, everybody, of course, would think that's in a very controlled, structured environment, but not so in that particular area. You know, it was, because of those incredibly high goals, the wild, wild west back in the 80s and maybe through the 90s.
So it seems to me, you know, just on the outside looking in, you know, when I was younger and I'd run across those military recruitment offices, you pretty much are given a quota in the office. They pay the rent, but you have to figure out how you're going to sign people up. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now they give you marketing support.
They'll give you the marketing collateral.
Yeah, the marketing collaterals.
But how you use it is up to you.
Absolutely. And the reason I say it was sort of akin to the Wild Wild West, Z, is because there was a little bit of ruthlessness. What we were discussing is the transition from military recruiting, where the general consensus is that is a very structured, authoritarian type of environment. When the quotas and goals are high, Z, It is just like Pepsi versus Coke or McDonald's versus Burger King. I mean, it's ruthless and competitive. And I learned a lot of, yes.
So you were recruited for Navy and you had to compete with the Marines and the Army.
Absolutely. And what I found out, and this led to my business sense, each of the services had its own appeal, right? And it depended on subliminal messaging. Each of the recruiting services had its own budgets. The Army's budget was engulfed everything that the Navy were doing, but the Army and the Navy, being the two largest military branches, had the biggest goals. However, the Army would throw enormous resources to make their recruiting goals, whereas the Navy says, hey, we have to spend money on ships and on equipment. So you guys figure it out with this much smaller budget, right? As it pertains to marketing and some of the supporting platforms that go into a successful recruiting endeavor. The Marines brought a brand awareness, right? That macho, we get it done, we're fearless, which appealed to the target demographic, which is 17 to 22-year-olds. Air Force was like, okay, we get a lot of interest. People associate us with aviation and all of those. So each of the branches of the military brought its own appeal. And the Navy was travel, adventure, right? And a lot of the benefits were the same as it pertains to veterans benefits that you would eventually be eligible for, the type of training. DOD across the board are the top trainers in this country. They are, and particularly in the 80s and 90s, because you had to be great, not good, great at your craft. And whatever that was. So when you look at it in a vacuum, you say, okay, well, it's the military and you guys have to do what you're told. No, you have to be trained to perform at a high level, just like your employees have to be trained to seriously impact your bottom line as the owner. And see, I think you understand that as a business owner, that your employees have to be motivated and trained to produce the results for which they're being compensated for. So when you put together this gumbo, after I retired, I was working as a human resource manager. Was not my forte, because I always wanted to look at the analytics. How can we improve sales? How can we do more, be better, be more efficient? And sometimes those things were in direct contrast with certain type of employment perspectives, right? Where you want to satisfy both management and the employee. Now, what you can do, and you can do, but it's a tightrope to walk to get the top efficiency and productivity out of the employees without overstepping those things that put employees into a position where they feel good about what they do. They're compensated fairly, they're treated fairly in the workplace, and that was a fine line to walk. So I went through a series of human resource management positions until I ended up as a human resource manager for Home Depot. In that capacity, I learned a lot of good stuff, and I was thankful for that, but then I got fired. So
I got fired. What happened?
Well, corporate politics can really put you in a a disadvantageous position.
I believe that.
And I was on the wrong side of an equation. And there was a corporate political battle going on between some entities, and I was caught dead in the middle. And the next thing I know, I had 1 foot out the door and 1 foot on a banana peel. So, so quite honestly, technically, I didn't get fired. I resigned, but they were in the process of terminating. So I said, okay, what am I going to do now? And I've always loved to teach, Z. It's been a passion of mine because I love to learn and I love to convey that information to others.
Right.
So I was going to teach, and that was different because generationally, and this was in 2006. So generationally, young people had a different perspective about teaching and learning. So I had got a call from a friend of mine who was a Navy buddy of mine who had retired right before I retired. He had gotten an internship with Naval Systems Engineering in Washington, D.C., and had worked his way to the top of the food chain. He was director of logistics and a dear friend. He said, well, talk to your wife and come and work for me in Washington, D.C. at Naval System Engineering as a logistician and a part of our small business program. My reaction, Z, was, well, I've never done that, Chris. He said, don't worry about it. You'll get it. So I made some arrangement. My former wife found out what he was going to pay, and she says, oh, you got to go. So I went to DC. And
so how much were you being compensated?
Well, at Home Depot, I think I was making a little over 70, in the low 70s. But he brought me in pretty much on the buddy system and paid me $85K coming in the door without me really knowing what I was doing. But I had a 3 to 6 month window because we're working on new ship constructions and they were in the design phase. So I didn't want to disappoint him or have him feel like he made a bad choice and let him down. So I just threw myself into learning the business of logistics and small business and contracting and writing plans and negotiating. It was just I was like a kid in a toy store.
Oh, wow.
Because I was learning all of these new things. And
you were in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is an incredible place to live and work.
Absolutely. So I just threw myself into that whole equation. And I saw the good, I saw the bad, I saw the ugly. But it was such a learning experience for me. The next step was, okay, he said, well, I'm going to take an early retirement because he was tired of the politics. And he was at that time in charge of he was a director of logistics for a $1.7 billion new ship construction. Then they had a second ship construction that was happening out here in San Diego at the NASCO shipyard, which was $1.4 billion. And he said, I need somebody.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding you right. These ships had a logistics director as it was being built and a budget of over $1 billion to build one.
No, to build, I think the 1.7 billion, we put 8 of troop carriers. They were just Uber for the Marines.
Okay, gotcha.
And they were hydrofoil technology. It was just all kind. I had to learn tech compliances, and I had to learn, and this is very important, Z, I had to really learn and master to a large degree something called FARs, federal acquisition regulation standards that govern all federal contracting from A to Z, not just naval system engineering. It was federal acquisition, and it's the do's and don'ts, the compliance, the terms and conditions, the being able to read scope of works and specs, and we're talking about the when I first got there, I would almost nod to sleep as we had our contracting expert go through line by line, 1,400 pages in a contract, right? And I said, This stuff is, but when I learned the whys and I learned what the end game was, I started embracing that tedious, monotonous endeavor. And I'd start looking for things that would drive decisions between all the parties. So it was very informative, Z.
Wow. So these contracts were literally 1,400 pages long?
The first one that we sat down with, and I think it was February of 2007. Yeah, it was about it was so much information. There were so many moving parts. There were so many potential partners. Now, Naval System Engineering builds the ship because it's a naval systems engineering, right?
Right.
But the Army wanted to be a partner in this because the mission of building these ships were to transport troops from point A to point B and do it at a faster, incredibly efficient, time-efficient process. But in that, there were so many considerations because Department of Defense is very thorough. The Marines wanted their ships outfitted one way. The Army wanted theirs outfitted like a tank. And we had to do weight variances because, you put too much stuff on one of those hydrofoil, it would sink. And it was so much fun, Z. I would smile every day leaving work on some of the outlandish things that I would hear from the Army engineers and for the Marines and their operational people. And it was, I was able to really understand the dynamics at play between companies and between organizations. And I did risk management, and that's something that you and I have discussed.
Right.
The mitigation of risk, the availability, reliability, and the maintainability of a product. And in this case, it was those ships. So if you think about some of your clients that are launching products, well, you have to gauge the reliability, the availability, which is access, marketing, distributorship, and reliability, maintainability, and the maintenance. In other words, the sustainment piece. So now I'm creating this foundation of knowledge, and I came back out to the West Coast as he wanted me to, because there was a new ship's construction out here in San Diego. That was Obama's gift to California after 2000, after his election in 2008, and I think that was 1.4 billion, and eventually escalated to over 3.5 billion.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah. No, that's and see, that's the beauty of it. My curiosity caused me to ask more in-depth questions as to the whys of what's the end game, of what's the strategy, what's the business strategy. Why is this shipyard being rewarded with this big multi-billion-dollar contract when they were underbid, had a better bid from the shipyard in Bath, Maine. It was politics. That's when you learn that politics pushes things in different directions.
Oh, wow.
So I came back out and I wrote contracts for vendors, small businesses, because on the federal level, every agency, whether it's Naval System Engineering or Homeland Security or the Army Corps Engineers, has goals, very specific goals, as it pertains to their small business participation. You know, they can actually set aside contracting dollars for those participants and certified businesses to compete and grow their businesses through the program at the federal level. Unfortunately, here in the state of California, you can't do that. You can't have set-asides, but you can have targets and goals. So I did that for a couple of years until that job pretty much went away. I satisfied the position description, and I thought, well, I'm going to get another opportunity. I might have to move to San Diego. But, you know, I said, okay, they're not asking. And my contract ends. And the week of Christmas, December 22nd, I think, 21st of 2012, I hit the bricks. The end of my contract. So I tried to find another job, and I was getting older. And as an HR, I knew what the roadblocks were. And I'm like, man, I've learned all these wonderful things in Naval System Engineering. And a lot of the insight that my dear friend and the gentleman who was the director for logistics, I was a defense contractor. So we really worked for the director as well as his fellow government employees. But he taught me so much valuable inside information.
Oh, wow. So when your job ended, the challenging, wonderful Washington, D.C. gig ended, what made you become this phenomenal business consultant that's helping small business owners like myself get these awesome contracts?
Well, it was trial and error, because I said, well, I know how to do certifications. Maybe I should set up my own shop because I'm having a problem finding another job. And in 2013, 14, I was getting small businesses certified. You know, I shopped around, did a little word of mouth marketing, and people started asking me to do more. You know, help set up the business's infrastructure. Or you used to be in HR, could you write this letter of discipline, or what should I do with these employees that I have? So I sort of segued into other areas in which I had some knowledge and a very functionable grasp of what they should be doing. And in the early days, I had companies that were successful and some that failed. And my curiosity has always been why. I always ask myself why. And in business, you have to know the whys. And so when you do your analysis, you can come up with a pretty good understanding that would be the building blocks or foundation to help small businesses develop better strategies for not only sustainment, so they can stay in business, but teach them how to scale their business. So I sort of became a jack of all trades. You know, I did a little marketing. I did some of the financials, the basic financials, not the CPA stuff. You know, cost, pricing, those things interested me. So I dove into it head first to learn. And I took a bunch of seminars on a bunch of different stuff. But more so than anything else, I took my understanding of the nuances and the realities as opposed to just straight academics, and sort of put together a gumbo of what I call my skill set to take the empirical wisdom that I gained over this last 8-9 years and added it with the academic underpinning to help small businesses prosper, to help them sustain themselves, to help them scale themselves, to teach them about contracting, how to read contract, how to really read contracting, how to take all of the 360 degrees of viewpoints and then put that together to decide which contracts to compete for, which are pretty much a no-go. I pulled it into that risk mitigation I was telling you about. I learned about products, and I could use my reliability, maintainability, and availability classes that I took when I was working in NAMCs to learn these kind of processes, and I could fit it into a small business venue. So I was trying to be as well-rounded as possible, Z.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I did, the more I learned, and the more I learned, the more I could do.
That's awesome. So my next question to you is, for all the small business owners that are listening, what advice do you have for them? Is it when it comes to, doing business in the public sector? Do you think all business should go into the public sector? Do you think, certain types of businesses should consider the public sector? And if they are, have a value proposition that can be, purchased in the public sector, what advice do you have for them to get their foot in the door?
I have the saying, Z, that you could be a baker and bake the best cakes and cookies and pastries in the world. But those cakes and cookies and pastries will sit on the shelf unsold until you plug in your marketing, your pricing, and all of those things. So to answer your question, public sector contracting is attractive, but it's difficult. But just like anything else, if you have the fundamentals in place and your product, goods, services, commodity is needed by the public sector, and by public sector, I mean everybody. So since we're in California, the county, the school districts, Metropolitan Rail, the state, the utility companies, all of them spend exorbitant amounts every year for services and goods and commodities. So you have to figure out where, as an individual business, what can I sell to them? What services can I provide for them that speaks to the value of my business? And if you can find that fit, then pursuing public sector opportunities across the board is a mitigation of risk and a chance to grow your business. I've had a recent experience, Z, where I had a general contractor who just hated, he was attempting to get certified and registered about 5-6 years ago, and he just said, "Oh, the paperwork is overwhelming. I have to dedicate my administrative assistant, and I'm just going to be out here in the private sector." Well, just like any business, the private sector can be a roller coaster ride. Now that he's not getting the business, he's looking for new markets. I'm saying, and a business owner, to pursue the opportunities that present themselves for you to take your cookies and cakes and pastries to market like a good baker. But you have to know the systems, and you know how the systems dynamics, just like in the private sector, are complex, and sometimes they can be overwhelming. But once you get a foundation laid, you can effectively compete in private and public sector contracting and get the opportunities.
So, do you help businesses acquire certifications and contracts all over the country, or do you just focus on California-based businesses?
My passion is advocacy for local small businesses. Being on a small business commission, I see all of the money that the County of Los Angeles has. I think for the last 2 years, they spent close to $6 billion in services and products and commodities and goods. And they have goals for small businesses, and they never reach the goals because their system isn't set up to be small business friendly. So as an advocate in that arena, to try to as best you can as a commissioner, push the powers that be towards a more friendly playing field for small businesses. You also learn from the other side of the table what they're looking for. So what happens is I do certifications, or I at least lay out certifications. I don't do certifications anymore. I do more business development, but I know it with specificity how to get your certifications and the why and how to market.
To understand the why of their certifications and
how to market them too.
And how to market, yeah.
Okay, let me use an example because I like to use analogies and metaphors for making these points. Say SEO Queen gets a Women Business Enterprise certification. Say the state of California comes to a decision, well, we need our website better developed. We need to bring in an outside entity to show us a higher performing type of algorithm or logarithm, and you would know best. But so let's put a contract out here. And now let's figure the scope of work. Let's figure the specifications, the compliances, and let's make this contract. Say this is a 12-month, $250,000 contract to provide consulting to our challenged web people and web managers and data managers to come in to make our systems more robust. So they said, okay, well, let's get terms and conditions. Let's put the scope of work in, the specs, the compliances. And oh, by the way, we need to show our bosses that we support small businesses. So let's make this a women business enterprise value proposition, as well as a small business enterprise value proposition. So they'll say, okay, when we award this contract, we're going to give you additional points when you get on this contract. So your $250,000 bid might reflect in their award system as $235,000 or $230,000 because you get percentages for being a certified women business enterprise and a small business. Okay, that's one way they do it. The other way, you bid $250,000 and they have a point system and they total up the point system to award the contract. And you get additional points in that system by being certified as a small business enterprise as well as a women business enterprise. So that's how that works. That's how that works. It's not just a nice to have. Even large prime contractors from the private sector award or subcontract out a certain percentage of their contract to small businesses to help meet the ask from that public agency.
I think that's so powerful.
Okay.
I think, when you talk about markets and expanding your market share, it's important, especially for small business owners that qualify for any of the areas of veteran, disabled veteran, minority, female, woman-owned. Just take advantage of these certifications to get these favorite status.
Absolutely. And the certifications themselves have become a cottage industry for certain people to say, hey, send us $500 and we'll certify your business with the state of California or with the federal agencies. Smart business owners learn how to do the certification themselves. And if they have problems, those that have, you can do the certifications yourself to a degree. The actual exercise of certifying, because you have to provide the documentation. And what I try to provide is why. Why do you need this certification? Okay, you got it. You are approved. You are a certified women business enterprise at the state level. Oh, by the way, you now can get a third-party certification as a woman-owned small business at the federal level, because we're talking about two different entities, two different platforms, let's say. So you say, what can I do with it? Well, you set up your marketing strategy, and something that you and I talked about recently, developing filters. So as soon as a contract by federal, state, or local hits the street and has a small business requirement, you evaluate it, look at the feasibility, and now you make a decision whether to bid on the contract or not. Because as small business owners, your time is incredibly valuable. So you don't have time spending 20 hours a week sorting through RFPs, requests for proposals, or quotes. You have to know which ones give you the best chance for success.
Absolutely. I know when we applied for some web development projects, some RFPs, it took time not only to read the RFP, but to answer thoroughly every single piece in the format requested.
So a contract proposal, RFP. Remember when we first started off, I was talking about that 1,400-page contract that has so many working components in it. Right. It was a DOD contract. And you have to have all those things before you spend that kind of money and put that kind of product or weapon system in, because you got taxpayers' money, they want you to get it right. Well, at the state level, say it's a web development contract, they have set this money aside in their budget and they want to outsource because somebody up the food chain might not be happy with the performance of his data managers or whatever. So they want to bring in subject matter expertise, which now becomes a value proposition. But in order to compete for that contract, you have to make sure or ensure that you're in compliance. And not just that you have the skill set to do a great job or to provide a great service or an outstanding product, but make sure all of those legal compliances are in place. If you read a County of Los Angeles contract, which might be anywhere from 70 to 102 pages, you like, well, what is all of this stuff? What does it have to do with the performance of my services, or the value or the quality or the performance of my product? Well, like I say, lawyers got to get paid. And in their mind, well, we're protecting our taxpayers' dollars and ensuring everything is in place. So when we award you this contract, you have to meet terms and conditions. Well, that's every contract, private or public. So a lot of times you have a lot of boilerplate in a contract,
Mm-hmm.
but you still have to read through it,
Right.
and that can be, I teach classes, Z, in, I call it contract analytics, but the service delivery organization that I do it for, they said, oh, that's too complicated. That'll drive people away. Why don't we call it the nuts and bolts of contracting? Okay. But whatever you call it, it is looking with an informed eye and request for proposal. There's certain things that fundamentally you look at first. What does it do? Do I have the time and resources to actually review this and then engage my resources to meet this deadline? And out of curiosity, you might say, well, this contract was, the solicitation went out, let's say, what's the day, the 23rd? Say it went out on the 16th, a week ago, last Thursday, and it's due today. Well, why such a short due date for a complex RFP? There's a lot of variables that go in that. And is that a contract you should bid for? In my informed opinion, no, because that means they're either looking at the incumbent or somebody else is already, they've lined up and they have to put it out to the public as a public solicitation, but they already know who they're going to choose. Now, say it came out December 16th, but it's not due till January 16th. And you read through in the language, this is a relatively new contract. There's no incumbent. So now I have a fighting chance. And as I read the specs, I build up the percent of contract readiness that I might have. And now it's all systems go. Still do your due diligence. Who needs this contract? Why are they issuing this contract? If my services are top shelf, will the compensation in this contract put me in a position to make a profit margin? It can be complex, but if you have the right template in place, it's doable. And as a business owner, and you know how important your time is.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't necessarily have the time to spend hours and hours every week looking through contracts. So if you have a process, a methodology in place, it helps you significantly. You bid on those things in which you have a opportunity to win, to compete.
Right.
And the ones that aren't destined for you, there's nothing you can do. And sometimes small business owners and entrepreneurs get a little desperate and they want to, well, I got to bid on it because I need the contract. Well, you're wasting your time. Find other ways to market your business. So.
Well, I think you shared a lot of great insight, when it comes to, a business owner scaling and growing, public sector contracts is a great way to do it. But when reviewing the opportunities, it's important to use judgment. I was told by someone about a month ago about government contracts that um, you have to be careful because sometimes if you are a subprime and not a prime, you have to be careful about who you partner with because you can get stiff. So my question to you is how can you as a small business owner collaborate on contracts and protect your interests?
It's not only getting the businesses, but it's protecting your position. If you have an opportunity to be a subcontractor, and that's something I've worked on this last year, because a lot of businesses can't scale, and it's all about scaling, and it's about capacity. And when you lack that as a growing business, as a new business, then how do I get there? How do I bridge that gap? Well, a good way is to be very skilled at what you do, the service you provide, or have a great product and look to become a subcontractor. The perils of being a subcontractor are a lot of the larger businesses don't like to pay you on time. Now that means, I got to have cash flow and capital to stay in business while I'm waiting to get paid. So before you venture into the subcontracting world, know all of the players and the relationships and the requirements from the agencies, and make sure you have templates set up to say pay when paid, not pay if paid. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of primes set it up like that. Well, I didn't get paid, so I can't pay you. No, I performed the work, and you look at the contractual relationship between the prime and the subcontractors. I'm not going to wait on you to get paid based on a flaw in your relationship with an agency, particularly a public agency. If you go to the public agency and say, "Hey, this guy's not paying me," well, they're going to say, "Well, legally, there's nothing we can do." We're trying to change that as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
However,
this is the big problem because I've talked to other business owners who have been subcontractors, and the primes basically utilize their time and effort to win the contract and then just ghosted them. And I mean, the other piece is, one scenario is you do the work and then you don't get paid, and the other scenario is you help them win a contract because they use your favorite status to win a contract, and then they don't even give you the work, don't even pay you, don't even anything. So you spend all this time to fatten someone else's pocketbook and nothing for your bottom line.
So that requires policy changes from the agency themselves. There are a couple, not many, agencies that make it a requirement that the prime submit to them the scope of work of the subcontractors that they needed or they listed to help them win the contract. But that's a policy change or policy adjustment that has to occur on the agency side, because large companies are going to do what large companies do. They pay you when they get ready. If it's a contract where you can just slap a mechanic's lien against them and say, okay, as soon as you get paid, there's not pay if paid. There's as soon as you get paid, the state of California says you got to pay your subcontractor in a reasonable window of time. Okay, so define that window. Is it 10 days, 15 days, 30, 60, 90? So all of those things, it's not an exact science, but you can leverage certain things to have a better chance of you getting paid. Now, performing the work, you're absolutely spot on. One of my favorite engineering companies, which is a disabled veteran business enterprise, well, this large construction contractor, corporate construction contractor, used his disabled veteran business enterprise status and that certification to win a big job. And they had the job for 18 months and he didn't see a dime of He didn't see a dime, nor did he do any work. And he called and complained about it. So we as small business owners and entrepreneurs and as taxpayers have to hold the agencies accountable, because those private sector, large contracting conglomerates and corporations, they're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I know that the LA Self Chamber has advocacy organization. I would be interested to know which agencies actually have that policy built into their contracts, and then start pursuing those policy changes by contacting our senators and House of Representative members to make this across the federal agencies, period, because this is a huge problem that I think, the SBA needs to address, and it needs to be a requirement because there's a lot of small businesses that suffer in silence. And, these are affecting small business owners who have bills to pay, kids to get through college, and it's not fair. It's not fair for these big companies to use the favored status of these subcontractors and basically just it's completely and utterly out of integrity.
Absolutely. And at the federal level, you get a little bit more satisfaction because a lot of the federal contractors, because they have specific set-aside goals, will tell that prime you will pay that subcontractor what he's owed and then give them a date, a milestone. Right. But at the state level and with the agencies, they don't do this. One of my biggest disappointments is the county of Los Angeles, and they just turn a blind eye to primes not paying their subcontractors and throw their hands in the air and say, oh, well, it's legal. Our lawyers at county council are saying there's nothing we can do. That's BS. Because on the other side of town, Los Angeles World Airport, which is sort of figuratively in business with the city of Los Angeles, has mechanisms in place where they hold their prime contractors accountable to their subs.
I've never gotten a LAWA contract, but I must say, for the ones that I was interested in pursuing, they have so much transparency built into the process. It appears, from what I've seen, that they're trying to make an effort to have an even playing field.
Absolutely. And another good example is MTA, Metropolitan Transit Agency Authority. I forgot what the A stands for, but they try to at least protect their subcontractors, which are more often than not small businesses. So there's things the small business can do legally to try, but at the end of the day, the change and the actual ethical responsibility lands at the lap of the agencies. It's incredible and it's something that I've been advocating for on the Small Business Commission, that build language into the contract that says to service this contract, this $50 million contract, we require that you support our small business utilization program. And here is the documentation you need to submit to us to be a contract compliance. And the lawyers for the big companies say, oh, well, we don't have to do that. It's illegal. Well, no, it's not. If the agency says you have to do it in order to meet the terms and conditions of this contract, then how is it illegal? And if you don't want to comply, we'll award it to another big corporation that is willing to comply. There's all kinds of ways to correct this thing.
I really think that this, I was told by, another business owner about this issue, and they were kind of like, it is what it is, but I'm of the mind that it can change. This should change.
And the people who can make a difference are your county supervisors, your city councilmen. They can they can make a difference.
Right. Well, how can people connect with you, Mr. Williams?
Okay. Well, I can post my contact information. I'm an independent contractor, and I have a business license as I'm a licensed business consultant, but I'm an independent contractor. So I can be reached. Do you want me to give it to them verbally, or?
Yeah, you can give it to them verbally. That's
Okay.
fine. Because they're listening on the podcast, on the app, or on Spotify or Amazon or iTunes. They're listening in a multitude of places.
You can reach me at 909-921-2456. That's my business cell phone, which I always answer. And if I'm unavailable, just please leave a message. And I always return calls. I always follow up. Or you can also email me at Anthony DD13 Delta 13 at gmail.com. So those are the two ways, and I'll return all reach and reach out to whoever has a questions. And there's a lot of questions I can answer or provide direction, because this is what I do. This is what I have a passion for. And at this particular point, I've been blessed, and I think it, particularly in minority communities and women-owned small businesses too, that knowledge and access are the keys. Access to information, access to systems, because you can't leverage certifications and the quality of your goods and service without access. And a lot of times that access is not known, or it's not easily known. But there's ways to bridge that particular gap so you can take those cakes and cookies and pastries to market and make all the money you can. I that's my favorite analogy, because if you don't, a lot of it'll sit on the shelf. And you brought up a great point about subcontracting. Real briefly, I have one analogy. I'm working with a young lady who is maybe a little bit above 6 figures, but she sends me contracts. The scope of the contract is 10 million, 15 million. Well, you're not going to get close to qualifying for that. So now, as an entrepreneur, capacity comes into place, where how can I build my capacity? So now it reverts not just back to knowledge of contracting, but if these types of contracting are available, then I have to transition into a much higher capacity to compete for them, or put together a joint venture or a teaming agreement with a like-minded or similar type of business. There's ways creatively to compete, is what I'm trying to say. But to build capacity is priority one if you're a small business and you want to grow to be a successful, sustainable small business. That it's just imperative that you understand the systems and the relationship dynamics of the agencies and the legal perspective and the compliance issues, as well as understand how your product, good, service, or commodity is one of the best in the marketplace. And that way you can successfully compete, and you'll win more than you think.
I don't have any other questions. I think that's great. Everything you had to say, and I hope the listeners really take to heart what you had to say, because the public sector is definitely awesome opportunity, awesome market that businesses should take advantage of. I mean, if you are whether you're B2B or B2C, exploring public sector opportunities can contribute significantly to the bottom
For the
line.
growth, absolutely, because they pay on time. One of the things about them, and depending on the industry, that there might be a greater need to engage the public sector, and in some industries, it's you're sort of boxed into the private sector. But whatever the industry that you're in, at the very minimum, investigate public sector business, because, like I say, they pay on time. And then once you're in their system, and if you provide good services, products, commodities, or products, you're in, and you have leverage, and having access and leverage is something that all small businesses need. Access and leverage. And in our community, that's really important.
Very important. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Williams. It's been a pleasure. And to all the listeners, make sure you go to SEOqueen.com, click on Speak to the SEO Queen, and take advantage of your complimentary Reach More Client Power session. I would love to chat with you about your SEO today. And until next time.
It's time to grow with the SEO Queen. With visibility.